Well, hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today for our webinar, Get Smart with John and Judy. It's great to see all the attendees here. So first, I just want to introduce myself and go through a bit of the schedule for today, and then we'll get started. So I'm Robert Seed. I'm a partner at Blue Summit Wealth Management. We focus in financial planning and sustainable investing for our clients. We really enjoy helping our clients make the most out of their finances and aligning their investments with their values. So today, I just want to go through some of the house rules for this webinar. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A button as well as a raise hand button and a chat button. All of those are ways that you can interact with me, the MC of the evening, and I can respond to you on the chat. If there's any questions that we don't get the time to get to, we're happy to answer those offline. And also don't forget, this is a happy hour, so it might be blurred out, but we're having a little cocktail to enjoy ourselves. Hopefully you are too, in some way, shape, or form. The schedule for tonight is we're going to have about 35 minutes of presentation. We'll leave 5 or 10 minutes for Q&A. And this session will be recorded and posted on YouTube. So you'll get that email and you can watch any parts that you would like to replay or send them on to anybody else in that format. So some of the main topics that we'll be covering today are investment real estate relative to stocks or the stock market, and real estate market trends. So I'd like to introduce our speakers. Judy is a founder and partner at Blue Summit Wealth Management and a licensed certified financial planner. She has been helping people make good decisions with their money for nearly 30 years and has specialized in sustainable and responsible investment portfolios for that entire time. In her spare time, Judy is a cyclist and enjoys backpacking in the Sierras. John Rice is a realtor with Compass. He and his wife, Lorraine, work together. And while they serve all of San Diego, they particularly focus on coastal North County. John is a health nut and motorsports enthusiast. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Judy and we can get started.
All right, now
there you are.
Got us unmuted. Okay, good to see everybody. A lot of clients here, some people who aren't clients, who we might like to get to know. We got a great spread of information for you all about being money savvy and real estate smart. And we're super excited to have John with us today. This is our first time doing a webinar together. And John and his wife, Lorraine, are realtors that work together and are also clients of Blue Summit. So we're very happy to have them. So I'm going to start in with our plan, what we're going to talk about today. You can see we have 8 topics. Do you really want to be a landlord? What can I afford to spend on real estate and financial planning basics, evaluating the purchase of an investment property, some case studies by John, some real estate and tax considerations, real estate versus stock, a glance at the real estate and stock markets, and assembling your financial team. Then we're going to take some questions. So John and I are going to kind of take some turns here, and I'm going to let John start off with talking about, do you really want to be a landlord?
Do you really want to be a landlord? Thanks, Judy, and thanks, Robert. I appreciate your giving me the chance to be here. Hi, everyone, and happy hour. So the overriding question always, first and foremost, is, do you really want to be a landlord? And some people are cut out for it, and some people aren't. I personally, Lorraine and I have been landlords for almost 25 years now, and I kind of enjoy it. And over the time, a number of our tenants have become friends of ours that we stay in touch with years after they've moved out. But it's some people are into it and some aren't. Number one, the three T's: tenants, toilets, and trash. Basically, it's you've got to work with people, you've got to deal with maintenance, and you have to deal with utilities. And are you wanting to do that? And it does take up some of your time. I can share With us currently, we have tenants who've been in for 3 years, and other than collecting the check, it's almost probably my management hands-on management per month is about 10 minutes, unless something breaks, and then I have to arrange to get the repairs done. But it's really, when everything's swimming along, it's minimal. And then when there's a transition, it does take a bit of time. It's important to have a team in place to help you with the paperwork, getting the tenant in place with all the documentation. There's so much liability involved with being a landlord now, and there's so many protections for tenants. It's crucial that you have all the disclosures in place and you're following all the equal housing laws. And if you already own a property, you want to talk to your insurance provider and make sure that you have adequate coverage as an income property, not as a residence of your own, which leads right into stress considerations. It's know thyself, right? You need to know whether you're cut out for it or not. The cost of the property management, it depends on what you want to do and how hands-on you want to be. In general, you could pay a realtor to locate the tenant and set up the lease, no property management, and that's about 6% the first year and 3% thereafter. If you have a full service property management company take care of you, that's somewhere between 7 and 10%, depending upon the level of service. And then if you are doing a vacation rental, it's about 25% for the management. So factor that into your math. Accounting and record keeping, that goes along with your accountant. Lorene does all that for me, so I don't really pay any attention to it. I'm sorry. And then Judy, why don't you chime in a little bit on the tax considerations, because you're better at that than I am.
Sure. Also, I might just back up just a minute about insurance. So if you have rental property, which I do as well as John, you need to be very careful, because the insurance that you carry is going to be a different policy if you're doing a short-term rental. And a lot of the policies don't cover short-term rentals, which is considered less than 30 days. So it's very important to make sure that your policy covers short-term rentals if you're going to consider doing short-term rentals.
Judy, a question on that. Like if you're going through a provider like VRBO, do they have their own insurance?
They do have a policy that a tenant can opt in for, and you can require it. Through VRBO, you can require the tenant to pay for that. So that's an option, yes. But you also need to be covered by a policy that allows short-term rentals if you are doing short-term rentals. Otherwise, something happens, it won't be covered.
I'm going to jump in there too. And I always put this in our leases. We ask that the tenant have renter's insurance to protect their own personal belongings, and we ask them to send us a copy of that policy, so we always have it on file. And that's a completely okay thing to do, and it's highly recommended.
Yeah, most definitely. As far as tax considerations, I've got a little more detailed slide on that later we're going to talk about, but generally, you're going to have to, as a investment property owner, file a Schedule C, which is a profit and loss from a business on your tax return, and this is considered a business. So you're going to have to keep very good records of all your expenses, and whether you do that yourself or you have an accountant or bookkeeper, but you're going to have your tax person file a separate schedule, which will include the depreciation, and there's cost basis issues that we'll talk about later. So in addition, shall I also add that if you're doing a short-term rental, you may have, depending upon the county and the city that your short-term rental is in, have transient occupancy tax. Here in our area, we have it, and it's different depending upon the city. The rate is different. I think it varies from 8 to 12.75%, for example. I know for the county of San Diego, you have to file every quarter whether or not you have any revenue. If you are listed as a short-term rental owner or operator, shall I say, if you have a quarter where you don't have revenue, you still have to file the form with the county. So that's another responsibility that has to be met for a short-term rental owner.
Judy, this is really an easy thing, but like City of San Diego, you have to pay a fee once a year to just be a normal landlord. Also, I think it's $65 a year or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much it is. Sorry.
Yeah, it's minimal. And
it's very
easy.
minimal.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to file, and you have to get approved, and then you get like an operator number, you know, and that goes on your TOT tax filing, your transient occupancy tax quarterly filing. So
I just underscore you, if you're thinking about being a landlord, you really have to ask yourself if that's the thing for you. And some people are into it and some people aren't.
We can give you lots of stories, can't we, John? Between you and I've been a landlord for about 20 years. Yeah, lots of stories. So,
you know, we've had
fun stuff.
We had one couple.
I'll drink to that.
You know, we've had really, knock on wood, but we've had pretty much only great tenants. We had one couple who broke a countertop in the bathroom doing something. But other than that, we've just been very fortunate. I think part of it has to do with the areas of town in which we buy our rental properties too. The price level has I think a big determining factor there.
Yeah, most definitely. All right, so what can I afford? So
what can you afford?
What can we afford? So people had an opportunity when they registered for this webinar to give us some idea of what they wanted to hear us talk about. And one of the things that came up is, how do I know what I can afford? So I've put together 2 slides here that address that. And this one here goes through 3 different properties. One at 800,000, one at $1 million, one at $1.5 million. Now, this is more a San Diego, price range, I would say. For a moderate property, this might even be a nice condo or a house in the suburbs, shall we say. Would you agree, John?
No, not anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah, 800. I hate to say it, but 800 is getting you into the outlying areas at this point.
Of the condo area, maybe.
Yeah. No, you can get a single family home in San Diego for 800, but it's going to be Escondido, Ramona.
Yeah, in the suburbs.
Mesa. Yeah.
All right. So the way we go through what this would cost you on a monthly basis is detailing all the line items that goes into a monthly cost down here below. So you can see an $800,000 property with 20% down is going to end up costing $4,500 a month. $1 million property, $5,500 a month, and a $1.5 million property, $8,000 a month. That's with a 20% down payment. You can see 160, 200, and 300 down. How do we get there? Well, we're assuming 1.25% property tax rate. So this is your annual property tax, and we break that down monthly. Then we're assuming a loan for the rest. Oh, this is a $1 million loan. Ooh, okay, I might have made one mistake in here. So we're assuming, let's look at this $1 million one. This is a $1 million loan at 4% for 30 years is $4,800. With $200,000 down, we've got principal and interest on the loan here. I adjusted it here. So sorry about that. We'll ignore this line right here. This is the principal and interest on the remainder here for each purchase. So this is the loan of the difference between 800 and 160 or 640. And this would be an $800,000 loan. And this would be a $1.2 million loan at 4% for 30 years. Now, we may or may not have a mortgage person as an attendee here, but rates have increased quite a bit from a year ago. You used to be at 3.25, maybe 3.5 a year ago. Now we're closer to 4, maybe even 4.5. Would you agree, John?
Judy, I'd say that as of January, they were closer to 3, and now they're closer to 5.
So we've seen a huge shift.
Yeah, and I'll talk more about that later. I've got some good hypothesis, optimistic hypothesis about that.
Great. So now we add into the principal and interest the monthly property tax from up above, an estimate of homeowners insurance, and then we've got our monthly housing costs, and then we're just making some kind of space holder here for repairs and maintenance. You're always going to have to make an allowance for repairs and maintenance. So I've just put in $500 for each of them, and that's how we get to the total. So,
Judy, I'd chime in here 2 items, kind of 3. With the repairs and maintenance, it's going to be a lot less in a condo because condos generally take care of the exterior structure. So you save a little bit there. However, all condos are going to have a HOA, and many home communities will have HOA also. And that's a line item you need to add here. And then the other part of it is if you're buying in a newer neighborhood, there's a chance you're going to have Mello-Roos also, which kind of feels like a higher tax rate.
Yeah, and for those people who don't know, John, go ahead and tell them what is Mello-Roos.
Sure. So when a builder is building a new community, there is infrastructure that needs to be added: schools, streetlights, parks, sewers, all those sorts of things, and they need to be paid for. And the builder can do one of 2 things. They can either wrap it into the price of the house, or they can create a bond and have the bond get paid back over time. And 99.99% of the time, that's what they do, is they have a bond, and that bond is basically the Mello-Roos, and it gets paid back. They have varying timelines, 20, 25, 30 years, and they gradually get paid back over time. A place like Aviara in Carlsbad, those Mello-Roos are disappearing right now because the bonds are getting paid back. There's a Mello-Roos in Carmel Valley that expires in 2025. If you go, basically the newer the neighborhood, the longer the more chance there is of Mello-Roos, and the longer it's going to be around. A place like Del Sur, the Mello-Roos is about $800 a month. So it can become a very significant thing to deal with. So you just want to pay attention to it, talk to your realtor, they can look it up for you.
All right, so what can I afford? That question has some guidelines that historically have been used by underwriters. Underwriters looking to give people loans for properties, and also property managers looking to place tenants, have historically used what we call the 30% rule. And so I've shown how this works here. If you have $100,000 gross annual income, your monthly would be $83.33. And if you allot 30% to housing, that would mean that you can allow $2,500 a month for housing. If you have taxes, and if we assume your state and federal combined are 25%, then you'd have about $2,000 in taxes every month. This means you have $3,750 left for everything else. Now, here in San Diego, getting housing for $2,500 a month is going to be really, really tough. Almost impossible.
And Judy, I'd chime in, if you talk to your lenders, that the lenders all have guidelines of what they accept in terms of percentage towards the payment, and it's It's in the 40s, actually.
Yeah, it's gone up.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm getting to. So, you know, this has been historically what's been used, however, in years past is this 30% rule. One other way of going about this is this 50-30-20 budget, saying that, you know, we're going to take the taxes out first. So here, if we take the taxes out first, before we figure our monthly income, now we've got $6,250 that we can spend on everything. And now we can take 50% of our after-tax amount to housing. This gives us $3,125. And then we take and allot the other 15% and split it between 30% for everything else and 20%, hopefully, to savings. Your IRAs, you know, your long-term saving for long-term expenses.
Retirement investments.
Exactly. So this is one other way to go about it. So that what can I afford question can be answered a few different ways, but hopefully this is some helpful guidelines for people here. And moving on, evaluating the purchase of investment property. John, did you want to go through this section? Or I'm happy to do this. This explains cap rate.
You cover that part of it, Judy, and then I'll talk about it in terms of location and that kind of stuff.
Perfect. And then John is going to do some case studies. So when we're talking about, now previous to this, we're talking about what can I afford? That could be for a property that you're going to live in, a primary residence. It could be for investment property as well. But if you're looking at investment property, you also have to add in the cap rate formula, because you need to have a return on your investment. And the capitalization rate is what investors look at. It's the rate of return on real estate that's based on the income that's generated from the property. So if we have a property, for example, in this example, that we get $5,000 a month from, that's going to be $60,000 a year. Then we have to detail what our expenses are that are going to come out of that to come into a net operating income, which is this $30,000. So we've got property taxes, we've got insurance, repairs, legal and professional expenses. We allow 10% loss of rent for vacancies, maybe more in some years, maybe less in other years. And then you have to figure whatever utilities you're paying. This formula here doesn't actually factor in that you might be using a property manager. And as John said, that's probably 7 to 8 to 10% additional. So that could be take quite a bite out of your net operating income. So in this example, we've got 30,000 net operating income. It's a very, very simple formula. We take your net operating income and divide it by your current market value, and that comes to your cap rate. So in this example, if we have $1 million property that we just purchased, and we have a 30,000 net operating income, well, we've got about a 3% cap rate. So a rule of thumb is a good cap rate is somewhere between 4 and 12%. Well, that's a huge range. A lot of factors that could affect, you know, what somebody's willing to purchase for investment property and take as a cap rate would be what they're expecting for potential for appreciation, how stable that property is, what's the market for it, what's the location for it, that kind of thing. So lots of things to consider. And John, you can now give us some examples, real life examples.
Just throw in here that when you're considering buying an investment property, you're basically thinking about starting a business. And just like if you were thinking of starting a restaurant, the key question is, where am I going to put that business? The question of where am I going to buy my investment property, you want it to be in a really good area. We all know that the first rule of real estate is location, location, location. But in this case, it's not so much where do I want to live, but it's, is there going to be someone who will pay me rent to live there? And tenants are just like homeowners are, in that they want to live somewhere that they feel safe, somewhere that's close to work, somewhere that's convenient to amenities. And I always ask myself, if the music came to a stop, would I be okay living in this investment property? And so that, for me personally, that's a question I always answer. Let's go to the case studies. All right, so this is a townhome in Carmel Valley. This is my townhome. So I'll just say that up front. We bought it for $550 back in 2008. Putting 20% down, and just for rough rule of thumb, if you figure 1% for closing costs, that always gets you in the ballpark in terms of, you know, how much is escrow and title and all that other stuff. If I were a perfect landlord and the place were in gleaming condition, and I just rented it to a brand new tenant, I'd be getting about $4,000 a month, but instead I'm getting $3,450. Like I said earlier, I spend about 10 minutes a month managing this property. My tenants are dreamy, and I don't have to worry about them. They're happy, they're long-term. So for me, it's worth it not to have such a high rent. You can see the cap rate is way below what Judy explained as an ideal cap rate. You've got taxes, repairs. You know, having that repair budget is really good, because some years I'll spend almost nothing, and then I've got to buy a washer and dryer. Last 2 years ago, I had to buy a new HVAC system to the tune of $8,000. And I know I've got a kitchen remodel coming up. So that's that. My legal is very low because I'm the realtor. So we just have to kind of throw in some stuff for accountant and that sort of thing. I've been real lucky with the vacancy lately, but it does happen. Kind of from personal experience, in desirable areas in San Diego over time, 30 days between tenants is realistic, and it just doesn't go more than that. I've never had more than 30 days vacancy between one moving out and another one moving in, having time to do repairs and paint and that kind of thing. HOA insurance, and like almost all rental properties in San Diego, I'm not making my money on the rent. The rent is simply paying for the mortgage, so that we've achieved a current value of about $1.2 million. So the appreciation is where the money's really made on this one. You want to go to the next one, Judy? All right, this is a condo in Del Mar. It was much less expensive, purchased by a client of ours back in 2009. It was a foreclosure. They paid all cash, so they don't have any interest payments or anything like that. Again, their current rent is very low because they've had a long-term tenant in there who causes no trouble and takes care of the place for them. Low cap rate, again, you can see how we factored it. And again, you can see the current value. It's tripled in value since they bought it. So this is having someone else pay your mortgage so you can realize the benefit. Let's go to the next one. This is a condo in Cortez Hill downtown. And this one, we factored it in with kind of more current costs. You're going to have a hard time getting an investor loan without putting down at least 25%. And some lenders want 35% right now for investment property. The rent's $30.80. Cap rate's still pretty good because the cost of the place isn't that high, and the rent's really good on this one. And we will see where it goes. We factored in an 8.5% property management on this one also. And that, you know, if you don't feel you have the stomach for talking to tenants, and really the thing that shivers most landlords' timbers is, my God, what do I do if I have to handle an eviction? And the property management takes care of that and eases all your nervousness on that. But it does eat up the management. It does eat up your profits. All right, let's go to another one. I think that's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
I do have one thing to add, John, and I think it's important for people to consider. So, you know, here again, because the prices are so high, at least in our area, the cap rates are very low. And you have to rely on appreciation for making this a good investment at this time if you were to buy today. But in addition, that mortgage that's getting paid by the tenant, if you have a mortgage on it, is also buying down your your principal. So you're also getting more equity every single month that the tenant is making their rent payment.
Yeah.
So that's another factor.
Yeah.
That I think is of value that we want to mention.
Really the bottom line in San Diego, in almost every situation, if the place can pay for itself, that's a win. And then you rely on increased appreciation of the property to realize your true profits over time.
Yeah. All right. Tax considerations. This is so much fun. Everybody loves taxes, and
cheers, Judy.
It's almost April. Cheers to tax time. And for those of you who have finished your taxes already, cheers to you. All right, so we've got 4 things to talk about here that we felt were the most important tax things for people to understand about owning real estate. And if you own investment real estate, you're going to have cost basis adjustments. You're going to depreciate your property over its useful life, which is usually the depreciation schedule that's used is over 27.5 years. And that's going to reduce your cost basis. So for people who need a quick little lesson on cost basis, if you buy something, whether it's a property or a stock for $100 and you sell it for $150, the 100 is your cost basis. All right. So with real estate, it depreciates over time and you get to write off a portion of that cost. So that $100 gets written off over 27.5 years and it lowers your cost basis. So you get a tax deduction for what you pay for that property because it's a business, remember? So that's part of your cost of running that business is what you paid for the property. Well, later on, when you sell the property, you have to pay taxes on that because your cost basis was reduced. Instead of paying taxes just on the gain of from 100 to 150, now your cost basis may have got reduced over 27.5 years to 0. And now you have to pay taxes on the whole $150.
So Judy, is it generally advisable to sell the property when you can no longer depreciate it?
Oh, I wouldn't say that that's any kind of a rule of thumb. No, I would say there's so many different factors on what makes sense for a property. And you can do a 1031 exchange, which is something if you have depreciated a property all the way down and it would be costly to sell it, you can buy a like property or you can invest in a 1031 exchange that's a securitized real estate, which we do as financial advisors for people. So there are some ways to get around some of those tax costs of owning depreciated property and not wanting to run the business anymore. So this is often the case when people, let's say, get older, they get tired of being a landlord. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of worry, it's a lot of stress. They don't want to run the property anymore, but there's going to be a big tax cost because it's been depreciated down to 0 or down to very low. So we can talk, if anybody's in that situation, we can talk to you about what some solutions are that can mitigate some of those tax worries. On the other end, if you improve your property, that's going to increase your cost basis. So, if you remodel a property while it's investment property, that's going to increase your cost basis. It's going to increase your cost basis, whether it's an investment property or a personal residence. So you always get to add your improvements into your cost basis. So again, that same example of buying something for $100 and selling it for $150, if you added $20 of improvements into it, now you only have a taxable gain when you sell it of $30. Now, if it was a personal residence, you get an exclusion. So if you sell a personal residence, you can you can have $250,000 of gain, tax-free. And if you're married, filing jointly, you can have $500,000 of gain tax-free. The most important thing to know is it must have been your main home for 2 out of the last 5 years. So it could be a rental property, but it could only have been a rental property for 3 of the previous 5 years prior to the sale. And so those are some of the tax things. I know it's complicated, but we're here if you have any detailed questions. So John now has some really great additional information for you.
I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk about the market at a real quick glance. And if you folks have more questions, email me or call me, and I'm happy to explain in more detail, or in your specific neighborhood. We all know property values have been going up. This is a graph from 1990 to 2019. It'd be very interesting if this is 2022, because the right end of that graph would be kicking up like the tail of a skateboard right now. But from 2002 to 2022, we've had 180% appreciation, and we're averaging about 20% per year for the last couple of years. So click the next slide, please.
John, what happened here?
That's the recession. Well, yeah, that's 2006 right there is where we fell off the face of the earth.
Right here.
That's the recession right through to 12. And then the things been coming up since 12 or 13, depending upon what city you're in.
So we do understand that real estate has cycles.
Yes.
And this was the big bust. All right.
All right. Why is the market so crazy right now? And the answer, a lot of it has to do with demographics. You've got millennials. The peak buying age for a first-time buyer is between 28 and 32 years old. And that's the age that the millennials are right now, 82 million of them. And they want to have their own home. And since the recession, since that dip that Judy pointed out in the last graph, builders have been building too few homes. There was a 60 Minutes article about 2 weeks ago where they think there's about 4 million too few homes built in the country. And so there just aren't enough homes, and there's too many people who want to buy them. And then on top of it, you know, we saw what happened during COVID in the convalescent homes. And so folks would rather use their equity and stay at home and get care at home, so they're not selling their houses. And so the boomers and the silent generation are sitting on their equity. Next slide, please.
Supply and demand.
Yeah, and we're talking about supply and demand. You can see the purple line at the top. That is pre-COVID inventory, and that's kind of what the inventory was year after year until COVID. And that bottom orange line is our current inventory, 35% less than we had last year, and some astounding number like I forget, like 250% less inventory than we had based on the 3-year average before COVID. There's just no inventory. There's none. So that's why. This is a quick graph on, we're talking about interest rates going up and how does that affect affordability. You can see that in this slide. When the interest rates were 2.65 on the left there, you could buy a house for $930,000. And now, well, it's way beyond 4.25 now, but that same money you would spend every month, a $3,000 mortgage now buys you $762. So at some point, the rising rates are going to put downward pressure on pricing. Next slide. And a question I get asked frequently is, well, people aren't getting their COVID checks anymore, and people couldn't work during COVID, and there must be this huge hidden coming inventory tidal wave of foreclosures, and it's simply not the case. The green line is equity of people's homes, and the bottom line, purple line, is the number of foreclosures. And this graph goes from 2008 on the left to 2021 on the right, there just aren't any foreclosures. There were a total of 11 foreclosures and short sales in San Diego last month, 11 out of, I think, almost 1,800 sales. So the percentage of the market is about that big. Next, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a quick minute because we did have a registration question about market trends in stock market, and interest rates are up, mortgage rates are up 4.5% when I wrote this for a 30-year fix, compared to about 3% last year. But the US economy remains strong. Unemployment is extremely low. Salaries are increasing, wages are increasing. The S&P 500 earnings were up 22% in the last quarter of last year and up 50% year over year. Inflation is high. This is negative. We know that. We're going to the pump, we're going to the grocery store. We are all experiencing inflation. So this obviously could put some downward pressure on the markets. So that's definitely a risk. Mortgage rates are up and they're likely to continue to go up.
Ooh, Judy, can I chime in there real quick?
Sure.
I'm sorry. I attended a conference yesterday with Lawrence Yoon, who's the chief economist of National Association of Realtors. And his assertion is we've had that big increase in interest rates, but it is anticipating the further rate increases from the Fed over the next 4 quarters. So it's his assertion that the mortgage industry is baking in the future markups. So he doesn't think we're going to continue to see rate increases like we've seen in the last 4 months.
Yeah, that makes sense. And mortgages tend to track the 10-year treasury. So, that's probably true. So that should help people understand what's going on in the markets just a little bit. Here's a graph of real estate versus stock. So on this red line, we see stock investing since 1972 all the way through 2022. And here is real estate growth. So if you just look at appreciation alone, the stock market has beat out real estate appreciation over time. This is the downturn in the market here.
And Judy, that's based on national numbers, right?
Yeah. I mean, exactly. So this is not area specific. And it also doesn't take into consideration the leverage that you use when you put a small amount down and you get appreciation. This is if you were to, let's say, pay cash for a property.
Oh, interesting.
And so this is some more data about real estate versus stock investing. Considerations, leverage can dramatically amplify your real estate returns. Some of the downsides are the time investment, the stress, the financial risk, the illiquidity. And, there is a risk that you could buy at a peak, and real estate cycles tend to be fairly long.
I always suggest to people that if you're going to buy real estate, think about it in like a 10-year chunk, and if the music stops, do you want to put your butt in that seat? And if the answer is yes, buy it. If it's not, maybe have second thoughts.
Yeah. And we also use some real estate investment trusts for passive real estate investing for people who want to be invested in real estate, but don't want to have hands-on real estate management. So I think that wraps up most of our presentation. I think what's important for people to know here is that it's really crucial to have a good financial team. Your investment advisor, your insurance professionals, your estate planning professionals, your estate planning attorney, your real estate agent, like John, tax professionals and accounting professionals, and your other legal professionals. And having a good team is important. Last year, we did a series of webinars with an estate attorney, and now we're doing with John because we feel it's so important to have a good financial team. One new professional can't do this all. John knows things I certainly don't about real estate. As far as Blue Summit, we have a handout we're happy to provide to you that says how we can help you with tax efficiency, with investments, with financial planning, with some of your estate planning, risk management. This is our team. We actually need to add one there because we just made a new hire, Martha. She's not on here yet. And we're offering anybody who attended this webinar a discount on a full financial plan. Just reach out to us. And whoops, John,
here we are.
Slide.
Guys, I really appreciate the chance to meet you through the miracle of Zoom. If you have other questions about anything, I'm a total nerd about numbers, and I know where all the best tacos are in San Diego. Don't hesitate to call us. We'd be happy to help you out.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you guys so much for opening the door without foundational knowledge and giving us a window into the world of real estate, rental real estate particularly. So we have a few questions from the audience that I'd like to get to and not go over the time too much. So the first one is there any value to holding properties in an LLC?
Shall I jump on that?
Sure, you can start.
I have a handful of investors who do own their properties in an LLC. It's a layer of protection is the simple way of answering it. And setting up an LLC is not an expensive thing. So I'd say, especially if you're going to hold more than one, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah, I would also add that my legal counsel said, you know, if somebody wants to sue you, whether you have an LLC or not, if you've done something that you shouldn't have done as a landlord, or you haven't protected yourself well enough, they're going to be able to get to you, even if you're in an LLC. So I think it's important for every individual to feel comfortable with their own legal advisor. If you do set up an LLC, although it's not expensive to set up, you're going to have to file a separate tax return, and that's going to be a little bit of an additional cost every year. Because that LLC has to file its own tax return in addition to you filing your personal tax return. If you don't have the LLC, you just file a Schedule C on your personal tax return. It's not as onerous. Another
thing, if you're concerned about protection, a possible simple solution is adding some umbrella insurance. That can give another layer of protection in a pretty simple way. And if you have multiple properties, you can have the umbrella, and it can be useful for any of the different properties if anyone has a liability issue. Thank you, Robert, for adding that. Perfect. Yes. Sure. So next question is, what are the pros and cons of having a home warranty company? And do you guys know what the costs are for that, the monthly cost for that to get that type of protection?
Yeah, shall I answer that, Judy?
Please.
Yeah, home warranty it's basically like an insurance policy where if something goes wrong with the house, then you call the home warranty company and you have a trip charge, kind of like when you go to the doctor, you have I forget what it's called, when you pay like $10 at the doctor. It's usually about depending upon the size of the house and what you want covered. If it has a pool, if you want the roof covered, if you want all the refrigerators covered, it's $500 to about $800 a year for the insurance policy. And it's usually about a $75 trip charge, and not everything is covered. They cover more, they've surprised me more on what they do cover than what they don't. But I think your money would be better spent just finding a good team of handyman, plumber, painter, etc., and have them ready to on speed dial when something happens. All my buyers get a home warranty when they buy a house for a year, but as a investment management, I don't think that's money well spent.
One question, I think this is pertinent to a lot of the listeners. So can you comment on qualifying for a mortgage after retirement, given some of the new regulations in place since 2008? And another sub comment on this is, even if you have healthy investments, that are, well over $1 million.
I can start on that. So first of all, let me say that we are not mortgage brokers, John nor I. We thought about having a mortgage broker on this call, but that would probably be best answered by a mortgage broker because underwriting guidelines change constantly with mortgages. But I would say, generally speaking, if you are considering that you would be buying a property or might be buying a property post retirement, that you might want to see if you could do that pre-retirement while you still have a healthy income on your last 3 years of tax returns. Because, well, they're going to particularly look at the last 2 from my experience. And, they can look at your investments if you have healthy investments. But if you do have healthy investments, then another way to get around that is to pay cash for the property and then maybe put a mortgage on it later somehow. You might have to, if you can't qualify because you don't have enough income for the mortgage, you might have to end up paying cash for the property. But John, do you have anything else to say about that?
I would just underscore, like you, Judy, I'm not a mortgage person. I can't keep up with all the guidelines. It's a lot harder than it was before the recession, that's for sure. Understand that lenders are generally really nice people and they exist to help you. They want you to get the loan and they'll coach you over time. Like, I don't know a lender who wouldn't be happy to take a phone call of someone saying, I'm thinking about buying something in a year, can you help me? And they'll coach you through it. They'll help you. So call a lender, call 3 of them.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And I think conceptually, some of the big changes from 2008 are they really want to see consistent and reliable income, which, employment or a pension provides, whereas income from investments, it's, that's an asset that can be depleted down to 0. So I think if you could pull from investments that have, where you're pulling a percent or 2%, where you can substantiate that this asset is going to last a very long time with the amount that I'm pulling from it, then that might be able to fly. But again, it would come down to the underwriting. So that's a really great question, though, because some people might be in that situation. So the last question here is, after years of real estate booming, pre-2008, there was a bust that almost no one saw coming. What scenarios do you see for the next 5 years in San Diego and broader in California?
That's a good question. As a bicyclist, I always think what goes up must come down. And things have been going up and up and up and up and up and up. And historically, San Diego real estate has been a series of stair steps like this. And it's been going up a long time. Right behind the 82 million millennials are 86 million Generation Z people. And Judy can chime in on the wealth transfer that's going to occur from the baby boomers to their children. It's just going to be huge. And couple that with all these professionals who no longer have to live in the city where they're working, but they have to live within 2 time zones. So people can live almost anywhere. We're in uncharted water. It has to come down at some point. Like I always say, plan for 10 years. And, if you look historically at most recessions and most dips in the real estate market, a 10-year span will bridge over any dip.
Yeah, I might just add, this person is really asking, I think here over the next 5 years, what might we foresee? And I agree, what goes up must come down at some level, and especially since, and I'm going to bring this slide back on here. If you're looking at what the monthly cost is for a property, now, again, this is at a 4%, so it's actually going to be higher today, but let's say you buy $1 million house that you want to rent out as a rental, and you have an extra $1,000 in cost because you've got a higher loan payment, because not only do you have a higher mortgage rate, interest rate on the mortgage, but as an investment property buyer, you're going to have an extra percent or even 1.5% tacked on, because you're not going to get the rate that a personal residence, you're not going to get the lowest rate. So now you have to say, well, could I rent this property out for, $6,000, $6,500? Could we buy $1 million property today and rent it out for $6,000 a month? It would be really hard to do that today. John, you showed the condo, that was a 1.9% that was bought in December, but that was showing, December's rates, and they've gone up considerably since then.
Yeah. So
I think there is bound to be some downward pressure on prices for real estate, but I also, realize that all the protections that were put in place after the last downturn have made it so that people need to have much more skin in the game. They aren't doing the 0% down, 5% down purchases anymore, where people just were able to go into negative territory so quickly. So now people have a lot more skin in the game. You have to have your 25% down for investment property.
30, 35.
Yeah, even more. So I think I would be shocked if we see anything like we saw back then, but certainly we could see some downward pressure. That would be my take on it.
It's musical chairs, and know that the chair that you might end up sitting in is the one you like. If the music stops, make sure that the investment property you've purchased is one that you really like, and maybe if you need to live in it, you would be happy to do so.
That's
good point. Good point to always look at in that light. Well, thank you guys for your wonderful insights on the investment real estate world, especially from your personal experience. So we're going to wrap up this webinar now. If anybody else has other questions, feel free to email any or all of us, and we'll be happy to address those. So thanks again for joining, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Awesome. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Bye, Judy.
Bye, everybody.